father of Hollywood.com, along with Truthwins.com, presents Dreamland, New Beginnings, written by Dr. Galen Whitley Keith, narrated by Keith Whitley. Chapter 6, Chicago, 3 years later. The wind off Lake Michigan rattled the glass in waves against the Rock Island Railroad building, a towering structure of stone and ambition set in the heart of Chicago's growing empire. Men in dark coats and black top hats hurried through its grand doors, boots clattering over the polished marble. Here, where the fortunes of rail and steel were decided, Hobart Johnstone Whitley stood firmly in his place among them. 3 years had passed since the fire, the scars upon his soul untouched by healing, though duty had masked them from most eyes. His leaner face, mustache shaped with precision, carried the kind of dignity earned not from applause but from surviving grief. Outwardly, he was treasurer of the Rock Island Railroad, a man of standing, of influence. Inwardly, he was a widower, a fatherless father, a dreamer turned sharper by fire. Inside the paneled meeting room, the long oak table stretched beneath a chandelier, its polished surface gleaming with coffee mugs, heavy folders, and stacks of paper. The directors settled into their leather chairs, voices murmuring like distant thunder, until H.J. rose at the head. His presence was calm, confident, and tall as he placed one hand upon the proposal papers. "Shall we begin?" His voice carried, measured, and certain. He glanced at each man in turn, catching eyes and holding them, establishing the authority that tragedy had cemented in him. "First, gentlemen, my thanks for attending. I trust you have each read the proposal I sent ahead of this meeting." Across the table, Ransom Cable, the mustached and goateed president of the line, sat stiffly with his arms crossed, tapping at his papers as though burdened by impatience. Half the board nodded quickly, some murmuring, "Yes." H.J. swept the room as he went on. "Then I am confident you understand our challenge. The state legislature debates laws which would set ceilings on what we may charge for freight and passengers." He paused, deliberately drawing the moment. This despite Congress striking such regulation as unconstitutional. There was a quiet stirring. Pens moved, papers shifted. Whitley's voice sharpened, but still controlled. "Gentlemen, if you remember nothing else today, recall this. The states will not leave us peaceably. Greed and envy never do. We must act before hands of government carve apart what we have built." Approval glimmered across most faces, but not Ransom's. The president leaned back in his chair, snorting, his voice mocking, sharp as iron. "Act, yes, but by limiting, by accepting less?" He leaned forward suddenly, fury flashing in his eyes. "Hell no. Do I have to remind you that no bastard ever won a fight by leaving money on the table? It cost millions to drive these rails across the continent. Men died, capital was risked, and you would have us pull aside? No, sir. We are not in the business of charity." His fist struck the table, rattling mugs. "We should demand our rightful reward for the prosperity we deliver. Before the railroad, overland travel cost $1,000 and 6 months of your life. What price is comfort? What price is life itself?" The room grew taut as wire. Board members shifted in their seats, some nodding with Ransom, others avoiding his eyes. Whitley smiled faintly, the calmness of a man who had endured worse storms than this. "Ransom, you mistake me. I am no ally of charity. But neither am I servant to blind greed. There is something more perilous than cutting profit, losing the trust of those who depend on us. Do we intend to build an empire of resentment or of lasting prosperity?" His voice grew, not in volume, but in force. "There must be balance, vision before greed, longevity before gluttony." Ransom surged in his seat, words flying, but Whitley lifted his hand sharply. "Sit, sir, and let us discuss this civilly." The command rang firm enough for even the heated president to pause. Turning to the others, H.J. pressed on. "We need a solution all voices can support. I propose a committee to study, to set an optimum price point, and to present it before us at week's end. We cannot govern blindly, but we can govern wisely. One by one, the directors nodded, all save Ransom. The silence after was heavy. Finally, Ransom muttered his assent, though his glare promised the battle was not ended. The meeting adjourned awkwardly, men dispersing into the fogged streets. Ransom stalked eastward, his fury palpable, while H.J. moved the other way, coat collar turned against the mist. For a moment, Whitley stopped, watching the president vanish into gray. Disgust crossed his face. Disgust not only for Ransom, but for himself, that he must share a cause with men so blind. And then, as always, he opened his watch. Fanny and Sarah stared back from the tiny oval frame, smiles suspended forever in memory. His jaw clenched. Nothing he fought for profit, law, boards, maps mattered compared to them. Yet they were gone, and the fire had left him only the duty to dream greater dreams on their behalf. Images flickered through his mind as if laid upon glass. He stood at a railroad construction site, surveying the tracks where steel cut boldly into unbroken prairie. Engineers huddled, pointing down the horizon. Whitley himself gestured with authority toward the future, boots planted in mud. A newspaperman called, arranging them to pose in a photograph, freezing forever that moment of progress. He remembered striding into the impressive chambers of the United States Congress, briefcase in hand. The air was heavy with cigars, power, and compromise. He clasped hands with congressmen as colleagues, passing the document to his assistant before climbing the podium steps, all eyes upon him. He, a boy of Michigan, now advising the nation's lawmakers. Another photograph etched itself. H.J. Whitley on the rostrum, sharp eyes glinting in conviction. He recalled also the Dakota Badlands, wild and untamed, where the ground shook under the hooves of a buffalo herd. He had ridden alongside men of vision, men of grit, among them a brash New Yorker named Theodore Roosevelt, his mustache falling over wide teeth, his rifle raised with enthusiasm. The shot rang, echoing across the plains. The beast fell, breath stilled, and together they strode with rifles across shoulders, boots in the dust, one foot planted upon the felled buffalo. A photograph again, brotherhood and conquest carved against the western sun. The memories passed as his breath fogged before him in the Chicago mist. With a steady hand he closed the watch and slipped it back into his vest. He straightened, adjusting his coat. For all the scars in his heart, his path lay forward, not backward. Fanny and Sarah lived now only within him, their memory his fuel. He turned and strode toward the street, into the bustle of hooves and wheels, determined to mold not only a railroad, but the very future of America. Come back next Wednesday to hear the next chapter of Dreamland, New Beginnings, written by Dr. Galen Whitley Keith. Narrated by Keith Whitley.